Welcome back to Hopeful Horizon, where we share stories that inspire change and open minds. Today's tale is one of courage, determination, and an unexpected stand against discrimination. It begins when a successful black businesswoman checks into one of the most exclusive hotels in the city, only to face blatant prejudice from the staff. But what happens next will leave you speechless, as she takes control in a way no one could have predicted, challenging the very foundations of privilege and bias. Stay with us as we dive into this captivating story about resilience, empowerment, and a surprising twist that will keep you on the edge of your seat. If you love stories packed with powerful moments and unexpected turns, make sure to leave a comment, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss an inspiring tale here on Hopeful Horizon. And let us know where you're listening from. The sun had just begun to set over the city, casting a golden glow over the skyline as Savannah Mitchell stepped out of her black limousine. She adjusted her sunglasses and took in the breathtaking view of the Grand Royale Hotel, one of the most prestigious and exclusive hotels in the city. The Grand Royale was a symbol of wealth, luxury, and high society. It was where the elite gathered for business, pleasure, and everything in between. For Savannah, it represented a place where she could relax, unwind, and celebrate the latest success of her tech empire. Savannah, a self-made multimillionaire and CEO of one of the top tech companies in the world, was no stranger to luxury. However, what made her story even more inspiring was that she had come from humble beginnings. Growing up in a poor neighborhood with a single mother, Savannah had faced more than her fair share of obstacles, but her brilliance, determination, and resilience had propelled her to the top. Her signature style, elegant but understated, matched the grandeur of the Grand Royale. Dressed in a sleek, tailored black suit and stilettos, Savannah exuded confidence and power. Her jet black hair was pulled into a low bun, and her skin gleamed with the kind of radiance that only success and peace of mind could bring. She was ready for a weekend of luxury, pampering, and strategic business meetings. But as she stepped through the grand entrance, the cool air inside the lobby hit her face, and she immediately noticed something off. The staff behind the counter gave her a once-over, a quick glance that spoke volumes. Savannah had experienced this look before, a mixture of disbelief and condescension, often followed by disdain. A tall, slim receptionist with sharp features and perfectly manicured nails eyed her suspiciously. Her name tag read Charlotte. Savannah approached the desk with the same confidence she carried in boardrooms. "Good evening. I have a reservation under Mitchell," Savannah said, her voice smooth yet commanding. Charlotte raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "Mitchell?" she repeated slowly, as if the name didn't belong in her world. She began typing on the computer, glancing up at Savannah every few seconds. "Are you sure you made the reservation yourself, ma'am?" Savannah's eyes narrowed. She had dealt with this kind of treatment before, disguised racism hidden behind a veneer of professionalism. But tonight, she had no patience for it. "Yes, I'm sure, and it should be under Savannah Mitchell. It was booked weeks in advance," Savannah replied, her tone firm. After a few moments, Charlotte's face tightened as she pretended to search the system. "I'm sorry, but I don't see a reservation under that name. Perhaps there was an error in the booking. We are fully booked for the weekend, unfortunately," she said, her voice dripping with insincerity. Savannah felt the familiar sting of anger rising in her chest. She had spent her life proving herself in spaces where she wasn't supposed to be, where people like her weren't expected to succeed. And now, standing in this opulent lobby, she could feel the weight of the discrimination she had faced time and time again. She took a deep breath, willing herself to stay calm. "I'd like to speak with your manager," she said coolly. Charlotte's lips curled into a faint, condescending smile. "I'm afraid the manager is busy, ma'am. Perhaps you could try another hotel." Savannah's mind was racing. She knew exactly what was happening. She had money, power, and influence, but here, in this space, none of that seemed to matter. They saw her as an outsider, an anomaly, a black woman who didn't fit their image of wealth. But Savannah was no stranger to challenges. She had faced far worse, and if they thought they could dismiss her so easily, they were in for a surprise. Before she could say anything more, a tall man in an expensive suit, likely the manager, approached the desk. His name tag read, Richard. He glanced at Charlotte, then at Savannah, his expression unreadable. Is there a problem here? He asked, his voice neutral but with an underlying edge. Savannah met his gaze, her eyes unwavering. Yes, there is. I have a reservation that seems to have mysteriously disappeared, and I'm being told that the hotel is fully booked. I'd like to understand why this is happening. Richard's eyes flickered, as if he was calculating his next move. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding, Ms. Mitchell, Savannah Mitchell, she said, watching his reaction carefully. Richard blinked, clearly recognizing her name. Ms. Mitchell, I apologize for the inconvenience. I'll look into this personally. Please give me a moment. He quickly disappeared into a back office, leaving Charlotte visibly uncomfortable behind the desk. Savannah waited, arms crossed, her patience wearing thin. She had no intention of leaving until she got what she was owed, a suite she had paid for. Minutes later, Richard returned, his demeanor slightly more respectful. Ms. Mitchell, it appears there was indeed a mistake in the booking system. We'll get you checked into your suite immediately. Please accept my personal apologies. Savannah raised an eyebrow. I'm sure it was an honest mistake, she said, her voice laced with sarcasm. Charlotte avoided her gaze as Richard motioned to another staff member to assist Savannah with her luggage. As she was led to the elevator, Savannah's mind was already working, formulating a plan. They had no idea who they were dealing with. By the time she was done, this hotel would never forget her name. As Savannah rode the elevator to the top floor, she couldn't help but reflect on the interaction downstairs. It was a familiar feeling, the discomfort of not being seen as deserving or belonging in certain spaces despite her success. She had worked hard for everything she had, but there were still people who looked at her and judged her based on her skin color and nothing else. The bell dinged softly, signaling her arrival at the penthouse suite. A bellhop, young and eager, opened the door for her and led her into the room. The suite was immaculate, marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and floor-to-ceiling windows with a breathtaking view of the city skyline. It was everything she'd expected from the Grand Royale, but the encounter in the lobby still lingered in her mind. Please let me know if you need anything during your stay, Ms. Mitchell, the bellhop said, his voice friendly but careful. He seemed to sense the tension from the lobby. Thank you, Savannah replied, offering him a polite nod before he left. She closed the door behind him and exhaled deeply. The suite was perfect, but the experience so far was anything but. Savannah dropped her designer handbag on the plush sofa and walked over to the large windows. The city twinkled below her, a sea of lights stretching endlessly into the horizon. Normally, this view would calm her, but tonight, her mind was elsewhere. She needed to act. She wasn't going to let this go. Picking up her phone, she dialed the number of her assistant, Lisa, who had been with her through thick and thin. Lisa, I need you to look into something for me, Savannah said the moment Lisa answered. Get me everything you can on the Grand Royale Hotel, their management, owners, recent scandals, everything. On it, Lisa responded without missing a beat. She knew Savannah well enough to understand when things were serious. And one more thing, Savannah added. I want you to discreetly reach out to our media contacts. We might need them later. Got it, Lisa said confidently. Is everything okay? Let's just say this hotel is about to learn a very important lesson, Savannah replied, a steely resolve in her voice. Hanging up the phone, Savannah sat down at the desk by the window. She was no stranger to discrimination, but what bothered her most was how common it still was. No matter how much success she achieved, there were always those who saw her as less than. But Savannah had built her empire on the foundation of never letting anyone's prejudice define her. And tonight, she wasn't just going to stand up for herself. She was going to make sure this hotel faced the consequences of their actions. The next morning, Savannah woke up feeling refreshed, her mind sharp and focused. Today was the day things would change. She dressed in a bold red power suit, one that made a statement. She wasn't here to play games. As she stepped into the lobby, the hotel staff seemed to stiffen. Word must have spread that she wasn't just any guest. There was a tension in the air, as if they knew something was coming, but weren't sure what. Charlotte, the receptionist from the day before, avoided eye contact altogether. Savannah smiled to herself. Let them be nervous. She walked to the cafe where she had arranged to meet her business associates for brunch. The hotel was known for hosting some of the most influential people in the city, and today would be no different. As she entered the cafe, all eyes were on her. It wasn't just her presence that commanded attention, it was her reputation. Her brunch companions, two powerful women from the tech industry, both investors in her company, stood up to greet her. They exchanged pleasantries and sat down, quickly diving into discussions about their latest projects and the future of the industry. But Savannah wasn't just here for business. She had a larger plan. As they chatted, Savannah discreetly glanced at her phone. Lisa had sent her everything she needed. The Grand Royale Hotel had a history of discriminatory practices. A few lawsuits had been quietly settled, and there had been several complaints over the years about their treatment of people of color and guests from less affluent backgrounds. This was exactly the kind of information Savannah needed. As the brunch continued, she mentioned the hotel in passing, recounting her experience the previous night. Her companions were appalled. "They didn't realize who you were?" one of them asked, incredulous. "Clearly not," Savannah replied. "But it's not about who I am. It's about the fact that they treat anyone like that. It's unacceptable." The conversation took a turn as they began discussing the broader issue of discrimination in elite spaces. Savannah could see the fire in their eyes. This was a cause they were all passionate about, and she knew that with their influence, they could take this situation and make it public in a way that would force the hotel to reckon with their actions. By the end of brunch, they had all agreed. The Grand Royale needed to be held accountable, and they were going to make sure it happened. That afternoon, Savannah returned to her suite and prepared for the next phase of her plan. Lisa had arranged a meeting with the hotel's general manager, a man named Richard Hollingsworth. He had been with the hotel for years and was known for being old-fashioned in his approach to customer service, something Savannah suspected played a part in the hotel's discriminatory practices. She walked into the manager's office with her head held high, exuding power and control. "Ms. Mitchell," Richard greeted her, standing up to shake her hand. His smile was polite but strained. "Mr. Hollingsworth," Savannah replied, not returning the smile. She sat down across from him, her expression unreadable. "I understand there was some sort of issue with your stay," Richard began, clearly trying to smooth things over. "There was," Savannah said, leaning forward slightly. "But it's more than just an issue with my stay. It's about how this hotel treats its guests like me." Richard blinked, unsure of where she was going with this. "You see," Savannah continued, "I've been made aware of several complaints against this hotel, complaints from people who have experienced similar treatment, and I think it's time the public knew what kind of establishment this really is." Richard's face paled. "Ms. Mitchell, I assure you, we take all complaints seriously. If there was a misunderstanding—" "This isn't a misunderstanding," Savannah cut him off. "It's a pattern, and it ends now." She stood up, towering over him as she delivered the final blow. "I've already contacted my legal team, and we're prepared to take this public. I suggest you start making some changes around here, Mr. Hollingsworth, because by the time I'm done, this hotel will either adapt or be forgotten." With that, she walked out, leaving Richard speechless. The next few days were a whirlwind. News of Savannah's experience at the Grand Royale spread like wildfire, thanks to the media contacts she had reached out to. Articles were written, interviews were conducted, and the hotel's reputation began to crumble. More guests came forward with their own stories of discrimination and mistreatment, and soon, the Grand Royale found itself at the center of a public relations nightmare. Social media was ablaze with calls for boycotts and demands for accountability. Meanwhile, Savannah continued to push forward. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for everyone who had ever been made to feel less than in spaces where they didn't belong. In the weeks that followed, the Grand Royale was forced to make sweeping changes. Richard Hollingsworth resigned, and new management was brought in. The hotel implemented new policies aimed at creating a more inclusive and welcoming environment for all guests, regardless of their background. Savannah, satisfied with the outcome, returned to her life, knowing that she had made a difference. But she also knew that the fight wasn't over. There were still many places where discrimination ran deep, and she was determined to continue challenging the status quo. As she stood in front of the mirror, ready to attend yet another high-profile event, Savannah smiled to herself. She had taken control in a way that left the hotel staff speechless. And she had done it not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. This was just the beginning. Months had passed since the scandal at the Grand Royal Hotel, but the impact of Savannah Mitchell's bold stand reverberated far beyond its opulent walls. The once exclusive hotel was now under new management, with a refreshed mission of inclusion and diversity that had set an example for other luxury establishments across the city. But Savannah's actions had rippled out much further than she ever anticipated. Savannah found herself invited to speaking engagements, industry conferences, and even television interviews, where she shared her story of turning an ugly situation into an opportunity for transformation. She spoke not just about the discrimination she faced, but about the importance of demanding accountability from those in power and using one's platform to affect real change. Her story became a touch point for other businesses and institutions that had long operated in a similar fashion. It wasn't just about hotels. Companies across various industries started revisiting their policies and culture. Savannah had unknowingly become a catalyst for a broader movement, one that emphasized fairness, respect, and opportunity for all, regardless of skin color or background. One afternoon, Savannah sat in her penthouse office overlooking the city, reflecting on everything that had transpired. The phone rang. It was Lisa. "They want you as the keynote speaker for the Global Diversity Leadership Summit," Lisa said excitedly. "It's a huge deal. Corporate heads from all over the world will be there." Savannah smiled. "Let's do it." Her fight against the Grand Royale had ignited a flame within her, a drive to keep pushing for justice, not just for herself, but for others. She was now more determined than ever to continue using her influence to dismantle systems of discrimination and uplift those whose voices were often ignored. A week later, Savannah stood in front of an audience of thousands at the summit. She gazed out at the sea of faces, executives, activists, and changemakers, many of whom had been touched by her story. As she stepped up to the podium, she took a deep breath. "My story isn't unique," Savannah began, her voice steady and confident. "It's the story of countless people who have been told they don't belong, that they're not enough, that their success or wealth still isn't enough to earn them basic respect. But what I've learned is this: we have power. More power than we realize. And when we decide to use that power, we can change the world around us." The audience hung on her every word, inspired by her journey and the courage it took to stand up in the face of discrimination. Savannah had become more than just a business mogul. She was now a symbol of resilience and empowerment. As the applause filled the room, Savannah knew that this was only the beginning. She wasn't done fighting. The battle for equality and justice was far from over, but now she had a growing army of allies who believed in the same cause. Leaving the stage, Savannah felt a sense of peace and fulfillment she hadn't felt before. Her fight at the Grand Royale had been personal, but the legacy of that moment was now global. She had turned adversity into triumph, and in doing so, had paved the way for others to walk through doors they once believed were closed to them. In her heart, she knew that real change was possible, not because of one woman's actions, but because of a collective awakening, one that would continue to echo long after her story had been told. And for Savannah, that was more than enough. Thank you for joining us on this powerful journey of resilience, empowerment, and standing up against injustice. Today's story reminds us that even in the face of discrimination, strength and integrity can lead to change. It's a call to action for us all to challenge bias, confront inequality, and take a stand for what's right, no matter the circumstances. If this story inspired you, don't forget to leave a comment and share your thoughts. Hit the subscribe button and tap the bell so you never miss another story that challenges, inspires, and makes you think. We'll be back with more impactful stories, and we're grateful to have you as part of the Hopeful Horizon community. Until next time, stay hopeful, stay strong, and always fight for justice.